Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Embark podcast. I am honored this week to have Mr. Michael Sartain. Who is Mr. Michael Sartain? I'm going to have him explain that to you as the audience because I want to be really gracious with his time. He is a social media influencer and he runs a program called Men of Action. And between his service with the United States Air Force and everything that he's doing now in terms of talking about relationships and the evolutionary psychology relating to relationships, I think it's an important conversation to have today. Mr. Sartain, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Hey man, thank you. This is great. I finally made the podcast. I'm excited. This is awesome.
Well, you know,
is that a real AR-15 behind you, or is that
no?
Like a stencil? What is that?
That's actually a CNC metal cut of an AR that my
tight. Okay, now I can see it. Okay,
yeah, my mother-in-law made that for me. Because she thinks because I'm in the military, I like to have those types of things. And I'm like, yeah, I'll hang it up on the wall, I guess. So I'm not going to throw it out, obviously.
Nice. Okay.
So Mike, tell me more about you. How did this all start? I know you had a very interesting childhood growing up and you were around the time frame of the global war on terror starting. And I think that's such a fascinating dichotomy when it comes to men today. You know, there are men who grew up during the global war on terror, and there's men who came out post global war on terror, joined the military. And there's such a difference between those generations. Explain to me what that was like, you growing up, and then what convinced you to join the military in the first place.
So I come from a family mostly of educators. My grandfather was the dean of the business school over at Southern Methodist. My father, you know, he informally, kind of like how I started my program MOA, he was informally teaching people about finance. My mother was, she was a nurse and a maternity nurse for 40 years at Baylor Hospital. And then I have an uncle and a cousin who are both, they both teach and perform orthopedic surgery. And then my grandmother was she was a school teacher. Just a lot of educators in my family. And just from that situation, I was the first person to join the military in my family. Nobody had been as far back as I could go. Nobody had ever joined the military in my family. And I went kind of a different direction after I got out of UT Austin. I left University of Texas. I actually considered going to become a high school football coach. So I was going to go do that. And then I ended up working in a nightclub because all the jobs were gone. Like there was a horrible, horrible dearth of jobs after 9/11 happened. But 9/11 also sort of motivated me to use my degree for something else. So I went and I spoke to my two frat brothers. I had one frat brother who was an EA-6B navigator, and he recently passed away from sarcoidosis. He was a major in the Marine Corps. And then I have another frat brother who was I forgot what the variant is for a C-130 for the Navy. Maybe it is a C-130, I don't know, but he was a heavy pilot instructor at Corpus Christi. And both of them joined right after 9/11 too, and they both graduated 1 and 2 years before I did. So I went to the Marine Corps and said, do you guys have any flying spots? And they're like, no, the only spots we have are for enlisted. You know, I'm at this point, I'm a little older than most of the guys who enlist. I'm 25 years old, and so I went to the Air Force and I said, hey, I'd like to be an intel officer because that seemed like what I like to do. I really had no interest in flying whatsoever. And the nav pilot portion of the AFOQT, I did exceptionally well. And they said, you're going to be a navigator. And I was like, and then after you become a navigator, you're going to try out for pilot school. And I was like, this is absolutely what I did not want to do. But I joined, I became a navigator and I loved it because the quick math and it was really great. But I joined probably in a lot of ways to make my dad proud. You know, my dad was pretty, very pro-America, grew up in a very different time. And it did. But unfortunately, my dad passed away 6 weeks before my first deployment. He was killed by a drunk driver. But a lot of that was for him and dealing with the grief of losing my father. A lot of that was pretty helpful in 2006 for my first trip to Abu Dhabi. I flew at Al Dhafra Air Force Base, and then that was my first 30 missions over Iraq and Afghanistan. The KC-135 happened because of that. But I ended up there because, again, it was just a function of the rhetoric, and I still agree with a lot of it. Like, I know a lot of people are going to have arguments about whether or not we went to Iraq, but I'll say one thing you can't argue about. There's 25 million people in Iraq, and 12.5 million of them were female, and they couldn't vote before, and now they fucking can. And people keep missing that point. And last time I checked, there were 10 million people that died in the war between Iraq and Iran, and there were also mass graves of Kurdish people that were murdered in the northern part of Iraq. So, I mean, are there a lot of other problems in the world we could have solved? Definitely. But the idea that the world is not better because Iraq is in a more stable place, that's just a falsehood. Not to mention the fact that its location, so centrally located, being next to Iran and so close to Israel. I understand why strategically we went to that war, but I don't have as much of a problem with it as a lot of other people do that, you know, are politically moderate like I am. So that's kind of, I know that maybe it wasn't the exact answer you were looking for, but like that's kind of where I started from. And that's how I ended up in the situation of joining the military.
Yeah, and I know you don't talk about it much, but I mean, being a KC-135 nav, it's especially during that time frame, was a really important part. I mean, you were right around the Fallujah time periods, and on all. I mean, that was some of the highest casualty rates we ever had in Iraq. What was it like being a nav on a KC-135 during some of the most tumultuous combat situations on the ground? I mean, there must have been guys stealing all your gas every like 30 seconds coming up for air.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So the way it works for a KC-135 is you only have navigators on there when you want to do nighttime refueling. And you know, the U.S. military, we own the night. That's kind of one of our sayings, right? So we would fly. It's really not smart, even with surface-to-air, like crude surface-to-air missiles, to fly C-130s during the daytime. They're just not very fast. It's not a real smart thing to do. Some of the slower flying aircraft, and same thing with helicopters, much more advantageous to be a helicopter pilot at night when you have night vision and the enemy does not. So we would do a lot of refueling at night. Nighttime refueling requires a navigator on the KC-135. And we were the only KC-10s can't do nighttime AR. They can't do, well, they can do nighttime. They can't do special ops, low level air refueling like we can, because they're not capable of the airspeed required to refuel a C-130 is so slow. We literally have to link up like this and then pitch the nose over. Think about an AC-130, how much extra weight's on there because of the munitions for the 110 millimeter and the machine gun and all that stuff. You literally have to pitch the nose over so that the AC-130 can, gravity will assist, and you will speed up into the KC-135. My KC-135, we could go 190 and still fly pretty well, 190 knots. That's really fast for an AC-130. So that's the way we made it work. We can't obviously refuel helicopter because there's no helicopters that can go fast enough for us. But like things like, because we also have these overpowered engines where a KC-135 is capable of flying Mach 1, but not recommended. You can do it one time and then the plane blows up. No, there has been one incident where KC-135 went into an uncontrolled roll and it did break Mach 1. It went into an uncontrolled roll. It had something to do with the control panels, and they were already at full thrust. The nose pitched over, it went down, and it broke Mach 1, and it really screwed up some of the airframe. But so the point I'm trying to make is the aircraft was a very, very robust aircraft. When Boeing made these aircraft in the 1970s, these things were made to withstand anything. Any kind of punishment. That's the reason why I was flying a 60-year-old aircraft, because it had these overpowered engines and this like basically perfect fuselage that was made for this type of flying. KC-135 was built in the 1950s to do one job: refuel B-52s for nuclear missions. That was the only job it was built for. And we kept it for 60 years and had it to refuel the entire Air Force arsenal with the boom, and the entire international and naval arsenal with the drogue pods that are on the wings and then stick on the boom. So, it's just an incredibly robust aircraft. For me, as far as going back to what you said, so we would have, I would be in contact with the LNO in Balad whenever we were doing radio stuff. And then I'm trying to think what I can talk about, what I can't talk about. I did hear guys with troops in contact talking to the LNO. So the LNO would be on the same frequency with the what I believe. I don't think it's a TAC-P, because TAC-Ps are for fast movers, but whatever the officer was, yeah, there you go. Whatever JTAC, whatever the guy, because I didn't know their names. Obviously, they didn't know my name. It's not like I can say, "Hey, it's Captain Sartain" on the line. I would just say Tanker 2-1 or whatever. I would be on the radio frequency with the LNO Balad, and then he would be receiving intel from whoever the liaison is with the forces in contact. And I heard bullets, like you could hear it. And then we knew we had to stay up there. A lot of times, the reason why you have a navigator, the other reason why you have a navigator for special ops air refueling is because, man makes plans and then God laughs. And everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, like Mike Tyson says. We would go there with an AR plan, and it would all get thrown to shit. And next thing I know, I spent the whole day just refueling one AC-130 over and over again, 3-4 times, just to keep this guy. He's got to keep orbiting because troops are in contact. Every single other AR I have is air refueling. Every other AR I have is now scrapped because this one guy, we've got troops in contact in this one area. And I was, most of the time, especially in 06, 2/3 of my flights were over Iraq and not Afghanistan. So that's generally what we do. In Afghanistan, it was a lot much less. Fallujah wasn't going on there, and they didn't use as many AC-130. I don't know. It was a very different type of conflict in Afghanistan, but we did a lot of AR there too. And then here's the other thing that would happen, Adam. Sometimes the receiver wouldn't show up. The troops wouldn't need to. There was no contact, so they didn't need helicopter. And there's another thing I should say. We would refuel MC-130s, who would then go down lower and refuel the helicopters, right? So those MC-130s would literally have to get gas from us because their burn rate was so high. I know I'm getting really technical for those of you who are like not in aeronautics, but the burn rate for a KC-135 is 10,000 pounds an hour, and we could carry 120,000, more than that, 120,000 pounds of fuel. We would dump fuel. So like you go up there, you refuel one B2, let's say you give it 60,000 pounds. Well, now I only have 60,000 pounds left. I only have 6 hours, maybe 5 hours before I hit bingo. So that's going to give me what, like a couple of F-15s or F-16s, like small offloads. Then I have to go back. When I go back, when I hit bingo, that's not up to me. As soon as I say bingo to the pilot, we go home, no questions asked. We have to go home, or else we're going to end up landing in Iraq. So that's generally the way it works. So for me, it was a lot of quick math. You would think like, well, with computers, can't you do this on your own? No, you kind of need a navigator for special ops air refueling, because the pilot is not aware of where the troops are. I have to be aware of that so that I know which refueling pattern we need to be at. So, and a lot of times I make them up on the fly. So it'll be a situation where I know this guy is here and I'm going to pick a track, and I tell the navigator, if it's a E3 or if it's a 130, they have their own nav. And so I'm in communication with their navigator. But if it's an F-15, they don't have their own navigators. Or if an F-16 or even an A-10, I have to tell them I'm doing their navigational mathematics for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely it does.
I tell them the track, the time, the altitude to be at. And some of these things are set, but I'm going to pick whatever's most convenient for them because I'm just there to serve them, right? We're just a mobile gas station. Does that make sense? So one of the things that was interesting about it is I had a very unique perspective on the war from a logistical standpoint, basically where we needed to keep aircraft loitering over what areas on and how long we were able to do that. And because the US inventory is the only inventory with like extremely capable fighter pilots and attack pilots, A-10s, stuff like that, and capable helicopter pilots and capable C-130 pilots and capable MC-130s that can drop MOABs and things like that, because we were the only Air Force in the world that had that. On top of our AR capability, air refueling capability, we were able to prosecute a war over Iraq that no other civilization in history would have been able to do. And by the way, same thing with our blue water Navy. There's never been a blue water Navy like what the US inventory has. So it would be the same kind of situation there. Another thing that was really interesting is we would have aircraft stationed, like positioned in Iraq that we do ARs with. Not so much in Afghanistan. Not a lot of very clean 10,000 foot runways in Afghanistan. A lot of the times the air war was prosecuted by carrier groups. And so in those cases, now I'm doing air refueling with a Navy jet. Does that make sense? So it's a different type of air AR. And then in 2009 for the summer surge in Afghanistan, I was a planning officer, and I got an even like greater understanding of the logistical operations that were happening in Iraq and Afghanistan, like what was being refueled over where. And it's really interesting. I mean, yes, I would say like my view of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was much more of a logistical one and much more of like, how do we keep as many planes overhead as possible? And there were a lot of, just so you know, there's a lot of nights with a lot of, F-16 wild weasels and F-18s and EA-6B prowlers trolling, just circling over troops, with the fear that these guys would get attacked, just so that we had air support every single night, the entire, 20 years of the war. We had to have somebody overhead. It wasn't a situation where it's like, oh, fuck, man, we're getting attacked in, Fallujah. What do we do? There had to be assets in the air all the time, every night. And that was part of our job as KC-135 navigators to make sure that happened.
And I really appreciate you bringing that perspective to a lot of these guys because you listen to a lot of military podcasts. It's always about the Navy SEALs and the frontline guys and the
Yeah.
guys that are doing all the sexy stuff. But at the end of the day, the reason why the U.S. military is as effective as it is because basically it's supply and quartermaster branches. You can't fight the war without fuel, food, and water, so to
Yeah.
speak, right?
Yeah.
And you were bringing that perspective, to that, and you're overseeing so much more. You have the fighter guy who's sitting in his jet and he's taking care of his mission, but you're like a maestro. You are orchestrating an entire air war, from the top by supplying that fuel to multiple different aircraft from multiple different missions. And I think it's a perspective that a lot of people really just underappreciate and don't understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was great. I don't think what my job did was like I was more brave. The only thing that made me brave was flying a 60 fucking year old airplane that caught on fire all the time. And like, nobody was no one was going to shoot us down. The only thing that was going to kill me was the co-pilot for not putting the gear down before we landed. But the reality of the situation is, from a logistical standpoint, I did have a different view of what was going on than a lot of other people did. And so whenever people ask me about like what was going on in Afghanistan, the thing is those trigger pullers that are down on the ground, their job was incredibly hard. I mean, especially some of the terrain that they had to go over in Afghanistan. I mean, there is a reason why Alexander the Great got his ass kicked there, and so did the Russians. Afghanistan was made by God to be a place that would never be conquered. And that's essentially what's happened to that place, right? It's a very, very, very difficult place. You were basically on the surface of Mars, right? It's a very difficult place to live and difficult place to prosecute a war. So I mean that was a very interesting thing, that we learned while we were there. But yeah, man, I will say this. And this is way outside the context of what you want to talk about on the podcast. But the thing, for those of you who are wondering, the reason there are when we attacked Iraq in 1990, a lot of people don't realize their standing army was larger than ours. They actually had more troops than we did. It's really crazy. I know a lot of people do not understand this, but I believe they had one of the largest standing armies on the planet at the time. Now, of course, they all surrendered as soon as we came in there because they didn't have M1 Abrams tanks. But the reason why the United States military is not just because of our defense spending. There's other reasons. Number one, our pilots get more hours and more quality hours, especially our fighter pilots, than any other military in the world. It's not even close. But the three main things are stealth capability, of functional blue water Navy, and air refueling. Those are three things that give us mid-air refueling, that give us this massive advantage of deployability over every other military in the world, right? The Chinese, for instance, did not have carrier groups until recently. They had bought a carrier from the Ukraine, and then they've torn it down and rebuilt their own. They're starting to build their own carrier groups. And they're still, while some of these other countries are catching up to us in stealth technology, they're nowhere near where we are. And we've had an advantage over them for several years. And as far as air refueling, it's just there are other countries that do have KC-135s, but their technology is so far behind us. Those three things are the reason why we have the most deployable, effective military in the entire world. I mean, obviously, I believe we also have the bravest troops, but we also have the best training too, of any other military in the world.
No, I completely agree. I mean, you look at, we have 13 super carriers. I think China has 2, Russia has 1. They're all rusted pieces of shit. And the Chinese ones are basically retired Russian ones, right? So
correct. And we may be putting those carrier groups to use pretty quickly here with Taipei and Taiwan.
I agree.
That whole situation.
The near peer conflicts that we're about to explore, and this is something that I'm dealing with now, is, I'm an old GWAT kid, so to speak. Yeah. And now you're seeing the next generation of warfighters come into the fighting force at 18, 19, 20 years old, and they have no concept of the type of people we're about to fight, or, they joined for the college money, or they joined for,
Well, but to be fair, they joined for a lot of people went to Vietnam because they didn't want to go to jail. A lot of people joined for Vietnam because they want to, I just interviewed Dan Bilzerian on my podcast. Bilzerian's father did not graduate from high school and got accepted to Harvard and Stanford because he was a Green Beret. So he went fought in Vietnam, came back as a Green Beret, and then he got accepted into Harvard. That's unheard of without a high school degree. That's unheard of. And so a lot of guys did that. So, I mean, there's always been situations like that where people join the military because they're trying to get away from something, or they're trying to go somewhere. There's also a situation where people get caught in a rut where grandfather was a farmer, great-grandfather was a farmer, great-great-grandfather was a farmer, father was a farmer. Now they're going to be a farmer. Fuck this, I don't want to be a farmer. I'm going to go join the army. That's also been there for a long time. For me, I'll just be honest with you, because I've talked about it on other podcasts. After 9/11 happened, or not after 9/11 happened, but after MCI WorldCom and Enron went out of business, I ended up managing a strip club. And I didn't want to manage a strip club. I just ended up going into a strip club one day, trying out to be a DJ. They made so much money. It was all cash. I ended up taking the job. And then they were like looking around. I was like, wait a second, don't you have a degree in a business degree from the University of Texas at Austin? I was like, yeah, I do. And they're like, do you want to be a manager? I was like, yeah. So I ended up being a manager at a strip club. And then I watched those towers come down on 9/11. And I'm like, I have a MIS degree with a minor in astrophysics, and I'm sitting here fucking managing a strip club. Fuck this. I need to go. So that's why I joined the Air Force. You know what I'm saying? I'm not that by any means. The only bravery I had to deal with legitimately was, like I said, flying a 60-year-old aircraft that could fall out of the sky at any moment. But I wasn't getting shot at like some of these other guys. And the other thing I will say this, and not to knock anybody, but the physical fitness requirements, you've seen police officers who get overweight. The physical fitness requirements that happen when you join the police academy versus when you're in are much, much lower. And the same thing happened with aviators. A lot of us got fat. And so my physical fitness was something I personally took into account. Also, man, we qualified with an M9 once a year. It was bullshit. Dude, they wouldn't. So my love of firearms actually came of my own volition. It did not come from the U.S. military. I did that on my own. So yeah, I mean that you had to take responsibility on that. But I'm a really good navigator, and I'm still a really good navigator. And so that part I got from the U.S. military.
No, that's awesome, and this is interesting because I know you mentioned the Enron scandal, which ended up crashing because of Arthur Anderson. And
correct.
Here's a funny connection with that. My dad's brother, so my uncle, was a partner in Arthur Anderson when they crashed Enron. Yeah. And he was part of that entire debacle. Douglas.
Well, Enron, to be fair, Enron crashed themselves. Basically.
Oh, they did. Oh, absolutely.
You know, for those you didn't know, Enron would basically, they get into anything that dealt with energy. And they would basically, just imagine I have a business. And what happens is Adam's my buddy. And let's just say, like, just to make this more interesting, Adam's my buddy and he's a patsy. He knows he's a patsy. Adam has a couple of felonies and Adam doesn't give a fuck. And like, Adam knows that, like, I'm going to take care of him financially if he does this thing for me. So Adam starts a couple of shell companies for me. And what I do is I sell all my liabilities to Adam, but I keep all my assets on my sheets. My sheets are called Enron. I run Enron, right? Kenneth Lay, what he was doing. And so I sell all my assets off to these other bullshit, my liabilities, all these bullshit companies. They end up going bankrupt, whatever. But my balance sheet looks fucking incredible. And then a bunch of people invest, and I end up, making money that isn't really there. But I get investors to jump in, and eventually, once it's exposed, the whole thing comes crashing down. I believe Kenneth Lay committed suicide. I think that's correct. Maybe I could be wrong about that, or he died. But that was the whole situation that happened with Enron. They were just fudging the books, and that's what. We may see that soon with Facebook. To be perfectly honest, we may be seeing that also with them. But yeah, that's essentially with Chesapeake Energy, another great example. Basically, what Enron did, a very, very similar situation.
No, you're right about Chesapeake as well. I mean, ironically, after my time at the Air Force Academy, I ended up getting to the energy industry, and I ended up studying a lot of these things. It's what I do now. That's my primary job, minus my guard stuff. But something that you bring up a lot in other podcasts and something you discuss as well is the dichotomy of leadership that you experienced in the military, and then how that transitioned your business mentality when you moved on, even after your father passed away, which is an absolutely tragic incident. So, and not only that, the same thing that was going on was the financial crisis and the housing market crash at around that same time frame. How were you able to navigate that? And then what lessons did you learn in leadership and how you wanted to develop yourself as an upcoming business owner and an influencer moving forward?
So I had a lot of, because of BRAC, base realignment and closure. I forgot exactly what the term was. My unit in Georgia closed down, and the 19th Air Refueling Group, and I ended up with the 22nd Air Refueling Ring in Wichita, Kansas. So because of that, I had several squadron commanders. I had my first squadron commander, then my third, then right before the base realignment, we had my first, my second, and then my third right before base realignment. Then when I got to the 22nd, in Wichita, I had one squadron commander, then a second squadron commander. Then I got pushed up to the wing. So now I'm working for the base commander. And so what I got to see in a lot of these cases was, what does a military commander look like? And he doesn't look like R. Lee Ermey from fucking, Full Metal Jacket. That is not what a military commander looks like. In some cases, I'm sure in Vietnam in 1968, that is what he looked like. But from being an Air Force officer, which is basically middle management for the U.S. military, it was not what it looked like for us. So when I had a really good commander. I had two female pilots as squadron commanders. One of them was an excellent commander, and another one was not. And what really made me really sad, because she was from my alma mater. I was one of her favorites because we were both Longhorns. She was not a good commander though, and got fired. She's the only commander I'd ever seen fired. And so when Jocko Willink comes out with the book Extreme Ownership, I'm like, oh, I've seen this. I know what good leadership looks like, and I know what bad leadership looks like. And so now I started saying, okay, let me do these things that good leaders do. So what is it? So what do bad leaders want? They want the authority without the responsibility. So let's not do that. No, the other thing is, what do bad leaders do? When things are my fault, I blame it on someone else. But here's another thing bad leaders do. When things are not my fault, I also blame it on someone else. What do good leaders do? When things are not my fault, I still take the blame. And I put my responsibility above my authority. Here's what I should do. I should never delegate responsibility. I should only delegate authority. So like, for instance, Men of Action, I've got a sales team. I'm the CEO of the company, but my sales team, I'm like, hey guys, I'm delegating you the authority to tell me when I just got off a 1 o'clock call I did here for my international clients right before I do this podcast. And I said, you guys tell me what to do. You are the champion of this. You whore me out to whatever you need me to do, and I will perform what you guys say. So I delegate authority to them, but responsibility, it still goes to me. Does that make sense, Adam? So that's what the dichotomy of leadership is. It's that plus followership. Like, I have to be a follower and let my salespeople who know more, and even if they don't know more, it's still, that's their baby. Just let them tell me what to do, and I stay in my lane. So that's the thing that I kind of learned. Whereas when I saw bad leadership, it was like, can't get a hold of them, always duck uncomfortable questions, ask everyone's opinion on things where they shouldn't be asking opinions on, incapable of making decisions, incapable of sticking with those decisions. And I just don't have that problem. The other thing is just like an unbelievable level of honesty. Hey, brother, I feel like you're doing this thing and this is not right. And then the other thing is, this is the big one, and a lot of people hate this one. They hate the fuck out of this one. Responsibility. Communication, Adam, is the responsibility of the sender. People hate this. They hate if I ask a bunch of, I host bikini models and I host photo shoots now. I host a bunch of beauty pageants. If I tell these girls and these photographers to be at this place at this time, it is my responsibility to understand that they received the message. It doesn't mean that because I sent the message, it was received. And when you come to that realization, you're like, oh man, these people are so dumb and they're not listening to me. Why won't they just fucking listen? No, if you want to be successful, you need to understand that communication is the responsibility of the sender, not the receiver. You need to keep beating it in their head till they know to be here at 10 a.m. no matter what. You need to get a positive confirmation and then screenshot it and send it back to them. Motherfucker, you said you were going to be here at 10. I know it's frustrating, but when you deal with the military, you don't have to deal with this because people understand I'm supposed to be where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there. In the real world, you'll find that people are much more lax and they literally will miss a meeting and then never call you to tell you why they missed a meeting, not understanding how incredibly wasteful and disrespectful that was. So that's the difference between military and when you get out of the military. But I also understand as the leader, I have to take responsibility for everything, even when it's not my fault. And so that's essentially what I learned from watching it while I was in the Air Force and then reading Jocko Willink's books and Robert O'Neill's books and David Goggins. David Goggins actually talks about bad leadership too, how some of it was his fault because he expected a level of performance from his troops that was just not realistic. Like most people who join the SEALs aren't ultra marathon runners. So and he even admits that he screwed that up too, right? And I have to do that with my clients. My client, like I hosted both Maxim parties this Halloween. I'm the only person to ever do that. And I have a very popular podcast and all this other stuff that's happening in my life. I can't expect my clients to do what I'm doing. Like I expect my clients to try though, and to try to be better. And so I have to be careful of that, to not like try to turn them off by saying, no, live up to my standards. That's not always possible.
So you've been developing a business model and a way of influence through the concepts of accountability. And it's something that's very interesting because even, we watched the fall of Afghanistan recently. And in my opinion, it was from a lack of accountability of maybe some of those bad leaders that we've seen over the years. And
yes,
and it's kind of funny because you fall into this category when I
they just threw money at the problem. They threw money at the problem. They thought that my money going to Afghanistan would equal the bravery of the Afghan troops to stand up to the Taliban. And that's just not how it worked. And there was not only was a lack of accountability. I live in Virginia and I am a U.S. senator and I have a cush life and I don't want to spend a lot of time in Afghanistan. I just don't. I don't want to go to Karachi. I don't want to spend time there. And if I don't go there, then I never really understand. Because I promise you, we go talk to people who are on the ground. If you were to ask them, they would have told you, yeah, this is going to fall in 24 hours after we leave, right? And like, it's not like we didn't see this happening. There's this place called Saigon. Like Joe Biden could have watched those videos. He understood, like, we had just as much invested there, if not more, than we did in Afghanistan. Of course it was going to fall. Like, obviously, like that in hindsight, like there's no one who had any connection with that place who thought that we were going to have a self-sustaining government that was going to stand up to the Taliban. Of course it wasn't going to happen. So that's essentially what happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to any of the actual special forces teams who are running foreign internal defense in the ground, even they would tell you there's no way in fucking hell. Like even Evan Hafer from Black Rifle Coffee Company, who was a Green Beret, during those timeframes, he would tell you, yeah, the second you leave, this is going to fall in 24 hours.
Well, I mean, you have to think about it like this, right? For our military, it's not a function of were they brave enough. It's not that function. It's like I live in a high rise right now. And like, let's just say that there's like someone in the other tower and there's like constantly fighting with each other. At some point, like, I don't know that I want to give a fuck about fixing that problem because they're in the other tower. And like, do I really want to fight this? Or the HOA, let's just say the HOA becomes super confiscatory. At some point, like, do I really want to go to the HOA meetings and like argue with all these people? I know it's a weird analogy, but like, you're now a member of the Afghan military. You really like, you're like, I'm sure you probably want your mother and daughter to be able to vote, but like, you're willing to get shot over that? Like, really, you're willing to die over that? And the answer was they weren't. They just weren't. You had a military that like probably most of those people opposed what the Taliban was doing, but not to the point where they were going to die for it. And that's what happened. That's where we were confused. We legitimately believed that the free thinking individuals who lived in Afghanistan were so different from the Taliban that they were willing to go fight and die to beat them. And the fact of the matter is they just weren't. There's people politically that I disagree with in the US, but like, I'm going to go like get a gun and like those. No, I'd rather like stay in my apartment. Like, I don't care that much. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's essentially what happened. I think like to us, the beliefs of the Taliban were so antithetical to American standard Protestant beliefs that for us, it's like, obviously, let's prosecute a war. We were also a lot, stronger militarily than them. The Afghan army did not have the advantages that we did while we would leave. And then it's like, how bad do I really care? Like, we're both praying to the same God, because they were, right? We're both Muslim. We're both praying to the same God. Like, how much do I really hate the Taliban? I hate them a lot, maybe 3 or 4 out of 10. But do I hate them enough to take to go shoot them? Probably not. That's essentially, I think, what happened.
No, I completely agree with that perspective. And something I find interesting about you is I know you were medically retired around the rank of captain. Mm-hmm. And some of the best leaders that I've ever met that leave the military leave at either E6 or they leave at the rank of captain because they've realized their self-worth in the real world, because they know they're never going to change a bureaucracy of the military. As much as I would love a bunch of major Michael Sartains in the military to help fix the fuckery that's going on, they just leave because they know they can do better elsewhere and make a real positive influence. What was your transition like when you left the military, and how did that lead you to where you are today?
When you are, there's a saying we have in the Air Force, is nothing like being a first lieutenant on flight status, because you fly. All you do is fly. You wake up and you fly, you go to bed and you fly. You're deployed all the time. You fly and fly and fly. There's nothing like being a major or senior captain in the Air Force. You don't fly anymore. And boy, once you make lieutenant colonel, you might fly once a month. You just don't fly anymore. You just like, hey, remember those buckets of bullshit you didn't want to deal with when you were second lieutenant? This is all on you now. And so you become an administrator once you become like, and again, I was an older captain. I was not a captain longer than the other people, but I was a captain at the age of 30. And a lot of people would turn captain when they were 26 or 27. So I was a little bit older than those guys. And so there was a mistaken belief in my unit that I was a senior like I was getting senior captain / major jobs when I had just been a captain for 6 weeks, because I was a little bit older, more mature guy than some of the guys in my unit. And I'm a bigger guy too. Like, they just thought of me as being older because I graduated. I was 6, 7 years older sometimes than some of the guys in my unit at the same rank. So I got some of these jobs. And what was the original question again? I got a sidetrack.
Well, like I said, what was your transition like when you realized I'm a senior captain? I'm not going to be flying anymore.
I'm saying exactly. I'm a senior captain. I'm not flying anymore. I'm not flying. Like the thing you were talking about is I know my self-worth, so I'm going to leave the Air Force. It wasn't that. It's like, I know my self-worth. I'd like to fly the fucking airplane. Oh, I can't fly anymore. Like, now I'm a planning officer now. Right now I'm doing military deception. I'm doing all these things that like I enjoy, but I want to fly, and now I can't fly. Like, you made me enjoy flying, and now I can't do this anymore. And now I just don't feel like I'm part of the team anymore. I feel like I'm one of the head coaches, and I'm not. I don't play on the offensive line anymore. And so that you kind of love you lose the passion for it in that way. Like, I'm sure there are generals all the time that remember infantry training and wish they could go get an AR-15 and go out there and fight with their troops, but they're not allowed to. They have to wear big flak jackets and be transported everywhere in a Bradley, or they have to be transferred everywhere, and they have to be protected at all times. And like, this is not what I joined the military for. So for me, I'm an operator. I'm a technician. If you ever read the E-Myth Revisited, they talk about the manager, the entrepreneur, and the technician. I'm a technician. I'm a technician. Look at this studio right here. Like, I want to talk on the microphone. I don't want to run the LLC. So like, as a technician, I want to fly the aircraft, and that's not what was happening. So I got out. Transition was easy for me though. And I'll tell you why, Adam, because while I was in the military, I was still working with club promoters in Atlanta. I was still the MC at a nightclub in San Antonio. On my nights off, I was still going out and acting crazy. The thing is, I wasn't staying out super late, and I don't drink alcohol or take any drugs. So the transition was really easy. As soon as I got out of the military, when I moved to Las Vegas, like, I still had that understanding of how, again, I managed a strip club. Like, that whole lifestyle was very easy for me to understand. And when I got here and I started hosting these events, it was just very easy for me to do. But I was taking a military mindset to some of these things, which is why, when it comes to some of the pageants that I do them better than anyone else in the world. In my podcast, same thing. Like, I understood the motivation of a lot of these people, and my book club, I go through maybe 40 to 60 books a year. All those things led to like a more proficient podcast, and I used a lot of the qualities that I learned from really strong leaders in the military, and I brought it to my regular life now. And then I completely forgot this part. So I manage money for prop firm, and I learned the math that I use to manage the money, because I use stock options, is very similar to the math that I use to control the aircraft whenever we were doing air refueling. There's this like moment of hesitation before I make the sale, or before I sell the option or whatever. And there's a moment of transition of like hesitation before I enter in the codes which cause the aircraft to do a 180 so that we can pull out in front of the receiver. I know the actions don't correlate, but the part of your brain to make those calculations is the same part of your brain. So that's the reason why that part of the transition was also easy for me.
So here's another thing I want to ask you while you're doing your transition from officer to civilian world. Mm-hmm. I'm an academy guy, and a lot of guys I went to school with are extremely socially awkward, and they have a really hard time. They get caught up in the government contracting side, and they get stuck in the teeth of the Pentagon for 30 years, living in DC, being miserable. They might be making money, but they're fucking miserable, right?
Yeah.
How were you able to socially develop yourself while you're in the military? So when you went into the real world, so to speak, and you started interacting with all these people, and you started having all these, these good transitions and conversations with people, how are you able to personally develop that type of attitude and rapport with people?
It's interesting you bring that up. So I have a Army pilot was one of my clients. There's 2 F-18 pilots that are my clients. I have several prior enlisted Army guys that are my clients. A lot of military guys who get out and feel like some level of awkwardness, like sort of the social skills that they were supposed to develop sort of left them behind because the government did not issue you a personality. That kind of thing, like they come and find me because of the transition. The government did not issue you a cat. You remember that health saying? Government did not issue you a personality. So those guys come and find me, and then I help them like sort of draw on that to become, for instance, man, the storyteller, right? I never fought. I was never in the infantry. Like, I never got shot at, but I tell stories about my airplane catching on fire and us dropping like 200-300 feet and me freaking the fuck out and everybody laughing at me. Cause like, the plane catches on fire all the time. Nav, what are you, stupid? Like, again, the story's funny, but because I understand how to tell stories, right? And some of the best storytellers I've ever met are guys who used to be in the military. Dan Bilzerian is one of the best storytellers I've ever met in my life. I was trying to understand, like, what is it that makes him different? That is one of the things. This guy just knows how to tell great stories. And so that kind of stuff helped. When getting out, what I wanted to do was transition to where, God, man, there's so many places to go here, Adam. I literally, in MOA and MOA Advanced, the first pillar in both of them is high status networking. Everything else is different, but pillar 1 in MOA and pillar 1 in MOA Advanced is both high status networking. And what we talk about is the ability to break rapport with people, then get them to qualify and invest in you. And it has to do a little bit with Jordan Belfort and his way of the wolf sales techniques, a little bit of that, but also has to do with Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. We just take that and we embody that. And now what happens is when we communicate with other people, even though we feel awkward, there's a reason behind it. My reason is to get this person to talk to me about themselves as much as possible, so that from that standpoint, we can build a connection. Like I had lunch yesterday with a huge television producer. And then yesterday, one of the biggest plastic surgeons in the whole country, he took me to go see the Canelo fight. And then I have later on, I'm going to do a photo shoot at this guy. He's a billionaire. He's CEO of a publicly traded company. I'm going to his house. I network with those people because I generally get them to qualify to me. And I also, I try to create win-win situations for them. I try to give them my perspective on certain things to build a real back and forth friendship. A lot of people like, man, I don't know what I could contribute. You being in the military, you actually have a lot to contribute, but you don't realize it because you don't realize like the scourge and the plague that passive aggressive communication is, right? And when you're in the military, you're taught to fight against things like that. Just there's a reason why a lot of people like to hire former military members, because it's like, hey man, David Goggins, I love it. He says, go to the mirror. If you're fat, say you're fucking fat. Don't make excuses. If you're fat, say you're fat, right? And then just go do something about it. And I found that military members, some of them tend to be able to deal with that criticism and give out that criticism a little better. So I like working with people that will tell me there's something stuck in my teeth, or, hey, that girl you're talking to, she doesn't actually like you, bro. She thinks you're a piece of shit. Like, I like that. I like that honest criticism from people. And so that sort of transition and that sort of lifestyle is the ethos that I built in the Men of Action program. Plus, there's all of us. A lot of self-help coaches really don't like to do this. They don't like their clients to compare notes. I'm not one of those things. I actually want my clients to all create a community where they speak with each other all the time. And then I'm part of that community. Like, I'm not even an instructor. Like, I'm just one of their buddies. And I try to give them as much feedback as I can on real life experiences that I've had in the last 25 years of, everything from flying combat missions over Iraq to managing a strip club, to managing a business, to being a portfolio manager at a hedge fund. Like, all the different things that I've done, I try to give all these experiences in there. And then the other thing, the reason why people are so drawn to me personally is because of my social media. Like, if you look at my social media, it's pretty irrefutable that I'm good at what I do. And so I try to teach other people to use their social media. Like, the majority of growth from my podcast comes from social media. It's not the other way around. The majority of the growth of my podcast comes from Instagram and TikTok. And then that feeds into the podcast, which then organically now YouTube is like, wait, this podcast is growing. Let's go ahead and send more traffic to it. And so the podcast sort of grows organically from there. My buddy who has a very successful podcast told me where he started, and I'm already past that point, and I've only been doing it for 4 months. I'm way past the point that he was, and his is really successful. So I know that if I keep on this trajectory, that it'll work out, and I'll keep getting better and better clients, and then or better and better guests. Then when you watch the podcast, it goes back to the thing that I was teaching the guys in the high status networking. Number one, how do we get people to qualify to us? By breaking rapport. Number two, we get them to invest and then go down this path. And if you watch Bilzerian, like Dan, I feel like he opened up to me more than any of the podcasts he's ever done. I have Chloe Teray coming on, not this, I have a theoretical physicist coming on this week. The next week, I have a 15-time Playboy cover model, Chloe Teray, she's coming on. And she's Canadian. She's going to come on the podcast and explain, like, I know stuff about her life, like her father and her relationships, that other people who've interviewed her don't know. And so I ask her about it. And so I feel like she opens up. I feel like I have the best podcast of Chloe Teray anyone's ever done because of that. So that's the goal that I have. At what we say in the Air Force, excellence in all we do, right? So this is the type of situation with my podcast. I want excellence in my podcast. I will do 2 hours of study on every single one of my guests before I even interview them. And then I give them the list of questions beforehand. And then after the podcast, I give them the opportunity to edit the podcast however they want. And so I feel like what I come out with is better than what anybody else comes out with. And I don't use clickbait. There's not pictures of, clickbaity things or crazy fucking titles to my YouTube videos. I just like, hey, this is going to be an intellectual conversation about quantum mechanics. And like this week, it's going to be quantum mechanics and relativity. And next week, we're going to talk about Playboy models in the Playboy Mansion. Like, I'm very honest about what it is the discussion is. And because of that, I feel like that's the reason why this whole thing grows so much. So as far as what you talked about before, as far as the transition and the awkwardness, I specifically teach guys, how do we make these conversations goal-oriented so it's not awkward anymore? And then I teach them, hey, I'll tell you guys, one of the best ways to stop being awkward is to be genuinely interested in what other people have to say. If you can do that, you will automatically click, you will stop being awkward. Because now what happens is, like, dude, Adam, when you first start playing chess and you get your ass kicked, you don't really like playing chess that much. But the first time, like the first couple times you start beating people at chess, like you can see 2 or 3 moves ahead, you become addicted and you want to play chess all the time. It's the same thing with communication. If you're an introverted person and I keep putting you in awkward situations where nothing goes right, you just feel weird and you have this weird head and eye movement, then you're not going to want to do it. But you come take my course and I teach you, hey, let's watch yourself on camera. Can we keep our head in the box, maintain eye contact, lower voice, lower pitch tonality, put spaces in between the words, and then genuinely be interested in what people are saying. So they're doing most of the talking. Now it's like, wait, this is fun. I enjoy this. I'm an introverted person, but I enjoy this communication now. And now I run my business. I'm a better salesperson. And then whenever I go on dates, girls just fucking love being around me because I'm a better listener. So those are the techniques that I would teach guys. And yes, a good portion of my clients, I'd say 35% of my clients have some military experience.
Absolutely. And obviously I want to get to your Men of Action program because I think it's fascinating. However, there's a few things building up to it because I think you're basically have created your own Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? Your MOA
Yes.
being the tip, your self-actualization, right? The top. But this is something that's interesting because you talk about this so often with other people. And I find it fascinating is your involvement with the definition of current relationships, men with women, dating women who like women. I thought that was one of the most interesting things you said, right? Because like we stated before this podcast, I read The Evolution of Desire probably about 10 years ago. And, I never thought I was ever going to get into podcasting. I mean, for me, the first time I ever talked about my story and my situation with the Air Force, I went on Andy Stump's Cleared Hot podcast. That was my first podcast ever. And then I realized, you know what? I need to talk to more people. I need to start interacting with people because if we don't talk about these issues and what we're trying to resolve, then it's never going to get resolved. But then I started finding people like you, where you have such a fascinating puzzle piece that I want to fit into the solution of this problem. Most people would say you're probably misogynistic. All you do is hang around with these hot women and you objectify women and blah, blah, blah. And I sit there and go, well, wait a minute. This guy is an advocate for domestic abuse, assault, harassment. The guy also does cat rescue, which ironically, myself and my wife do. We foster kittens and we do cat rescue too.
Yeah.
And then I sit there and then listen to your perception on relationships and the interactions with women and how evolutionary psychology plays a huge component into how you interact with people. And it works. People don't understand or don't want to admit that maybe the monogamy perspective on current relationships or the influences of something that I would say is mostly religious, Catholic Church or something like that, their inhibitions to solidify what relationships should be defined as. You have openly discussed evolutionary psychology, relationships between men and women, and how that all plays a part into creating a community that has made such a difference in your own personal world and everything that you do. What made you so interested in evolutionary psychology when it comes to relationships? And how has that played an important aspect in your life now and what you do?
So I'm trying to remember where the first person, it was Ty Lopez. I did an interview with Ty Lopez. He recommended a bunch of books. And that was the first David Bussard book I'd ever read. It was called Why Women Have Sex. What happens is, because I come from I do not actually have a minor in astronomy. And the only reason I don't have a minor in astronomy is because the business school at UT Austin would not let you have a minor outside the business school. So I took the requirements for a minor in astronomy. I just never finished it. But astronomy was a passion of mine. And one of the things we talk about in astronomy, astrophysics, and like the last 20 years, I've been reading every single thing. I read every book by Hawking, every book by Neil deGrasse Tyson, every book by several other physicists, Michio Kaku, whoever. There's a standard model of particle physics, and then there's these other like theoretical models dealing with like M theory, string theory, like that. Then you take the models and then you try to fit the model into what you see empirically. Okay, this is how we do in physics. Okay, I say we, I'm not a physicist, but this is how scientists basically prosecute physics, right? So we took relativity, we put it up against the world. We saw the orbit of Mercury, and we saw gravitational lensing with the sun. It's like, okay, relativity looks like it's real. This looks like it's a real thing, okay? And we use it with GPS satellites also. And we looked at quantum mechanics, and then we started looking at we look at where photons were, and they behave like particles and waves. There's particle wave duality, and we created things like lasers from quantum mechanics. So we said, okay, we fit quantum mechanics, that whole system of reality. And then turns out it made sense. So now let's do the same thing with psychology. We take B.F. Skinner and we take all these behavioral psychologists, and they're like, well, okay, Adam, if we give you a Barbie doll when you grow up, you're going to grow up being more feminine. And you might actually be a homosexual man if we give you Barbie dolls when you grow up. And you're like, that doesn't feel right. Something there doesn't feel, I don't know if that's true. Adam, you understand the reason why you like eating junk food is because you look at commercials of junk food. No, I don't know if that's true. Hey, Adam, you understand the reason why you find women attractive that have small waist, large breasts, and curvy hips is because those are the images that you've watched on television. I know that one's not true. That one, I was born with that one. That one's for sure. So you start understanding that behaviorists try to explain your preferences through cultural things and stimulus that you see in your whole life. And evolutionary psychologists do not. The evolutionary psychology model, when you fit that on, basically the idea is that all your preferences come from your ancestors, and these things were selected for over 300,000 years of Homo sapien evolution and 3 million years of hominid evolution. And so when you look at that, and you fit in it, you go to the same thing. Actually, Adam, the reason why you eat sugar, salt, and fat is because your ancestors needed it in order to survive. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Hey, actually, Adam, the reason why you find women who look like this attractive is because those are actually signs of youth and fertility, which would give you a higher likelihood of being able to reproduce and have children. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, Adam, the reason why you behave like you want to go off and serve your country by joining the military, or the other things that you do by getting yourself groomed in a certain way or going to the gym, is to achieve higher sexual status and higher status in general. Oh, that really makes sense. Okay, now this really makes sense. Even Napoleon Hill talks about sexual motivation in his book, Think and Grow Rich. And so now when you look at the world through the evolutionary psychology model, everything makes sense. When you look at the world through the behaviorist model, some of it makes sense. A lot of it seems like cockamamie, horseshit, bullshit. Okay, I don't think that women who are attractive to me are attractive because I've seen images of women like that. I think they're attractive because my father, my grandfather, and going back hundreds of thousands of years, found women who look like that to be attractive. And so I was selected for that evolutionary. Now that is offensive to some people. What I just said is offensive to some people. They don't like to hear that. But the problem is every time you pose a problem to the model of evolutionary psychology tends to come out 100 times out of 100 comes out with the correct answer. So that's why evolutionary psychology sort of kind of became a default thing for me when it came to educating my clients. I started using all of David Boss's books in order to do that kind of educating. The problem is it's not anti-woke, but it's not woke. Evolutionary psychology deals with how the world used to be, and the world was not woke 50,000 years ago. And so a lot of the things that we talk about, like for instance, gender roles are very clearly defined 50,000 years ago. I don't care what anyone says. They were very, very clearly defined 50,000 years ago. And today they aren't, and that's fine that they're not. That's totally fine. I'm not saying that that's the way things ought to be, but that's the way things were 100%. And so when I use evolutionary psychology in order to try to determine what to do or what someone's motivation is, I come up with the right answer 100% of the time. So that's become sort of like my go-to when it comes to that. As far as the other thing you said before, what does it say in the Air Force Code of Conduct? I will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor will I tolerate anyone amongst us who does. And so because of that, I only date women who like women. So we date women together. And so because of that, the main reason I do that is because I never have to lie. And because of the lifestyle that I living out here in Las Vegas, I meet a lot of women who are like that. And I find myself to be like, yeah, of course, Michael, you have threesomes all the time. Of course you're happier. Yes. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it, but yes, I love being with women who I enjoy sleeping in a bed with 2 or 3 women. That's just my thing. It doesn't make me a pig, but I also don't lie to any of them about it. And because of that, they enjoy it, I enjoy it, and I try to make their lives better, and they enjoy being in my life. For some people, like literally the fact that I'm not choosing a monogamous lifestyle where I am having children at the age of 25 and then taking them to church every Sunday, but by definition, I'm a bad person because I don't do that. And I don't think that's the case. Additionally, I do not think it is my duty as a human being to have more children. I can come up with you several reasons why more children are not the answer. There's nothing wrong. If you want to have children, have children. What I don't like is this sort of societal arm twisting that basically if you do not become monogamous to one woman and then raise those children with that one woman, therefore you are not a man and you are a bad person or a loser. That to me, I've had a significant problem with. So I believe there's a lot of contributions that I can make to society and make the world a better place without necessarily getting married and having kids and living in a nuclear family, which by the way, I probably will get married and have kids. at some point, but I just don't. I'm going to do that when I choose to do it, not when McDonald's and Disney and my family choose for me. Make sense?
No, absolutely. And you speak of these things, and it's such a taboo to talk about in our culture. And I think the discussion, and this is my perspective, the discussion of human sexuality in the modern context, I believe, is what has led to not understanding the abuse, the assaults, the harassment, and even David Buss's new book, when men behave badly, right? It's not accepting the fact that humans are basically bred to be ethically non-monogamous in a way. It's something that's just not accepted, especially by American culture now. Why do you think that it's not accepted according to current cultural standards, even though I think you and I would both agree that most of the people that we know are probably polyamorous, and probably non-monogamous.
But they don't say that. But they don't say that they are, because they're like, I want my dream man. And then they're with their dream man for 6 months, and they're like, oh, he's needy, and I've changed, and what I want is change, and he's not ambitious enough, so I'm going to leave him. Well, that means you're not monogamous. You're trying to, I know a lot of women who do this thing where it's like they date a man, and then they get tired of him and move on to another man, and yet they keep saying they want monogamy. No, you don't. That's in hard times, and in good times you stay with this dude, but they don't want to do that. It's like monogamy until he does not validate me anymore. Then I want to go be with another guy who's even hotter and richer or better looking. That's not monogamy. You're doing the same thing men are doing that you're complaining about, right? And I brought this up several times. Let's go back. Let's talk about why. Again, the answer is always evolutionary psychology. So let's go back and let's talk about this. Let's go back to the Sumerians. So the Sumerians come around, or let's just go back to the beginning of the agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution is the first time in any point in history where men owned things, where a man owned more things than another man, like farmland or cattle or something like that. And so because of that, one man could employ another man to work for him. So now we start seeing, this is the first point in history where we started seeing an inequality of wealth. You with me so far? Okay. With that inequality of wealth, we start seeing certain situations where people who are wealthy want to leave their wealth to their children. Nepotism. That nepotism, it's naturally selected for through revolution. And so how do we leave that wealth to our children? What is the best way for us to do it? We maintain these clumps of wealth in certain sectors with certain groups. So what do? We create this thing called marriage. And this thing called marriage, what is the original purpose for marriage? Is it like Romeo and Juliet, where they find love, and you find your true love and your soulmate, and you guys get married and stay together forever? Or was it a way for wealthier people to maintain wealth in small groups of individuals? In fact, so much to the point that the reason the Catholic Church did not allow their clergy to marry is because they didn't want their clergy to now inherit some of that wealth that the nobility had already stored up over thousands and thousands of years. So now in this situation, the Sumerians, again, go back to the beginning of the agricultural revolution, we have marriage. And what marriage does is take farmer A and his livestock and his farm, and farmer B and their livestock and their farm, and then his daughter and his son now get married. And now we have combined this livestock and this farmland to conglomerate even more wealth in a smaller group. Does that make sense? Basically, wealthy people maintaining their wealth was the original purpose for marriage in the agricultural revolution. Go ahead and at me if you disagree. It has nothing to do with true love whatsoever. It was a function for breeding and maintaining wealth in certain pockets of society. That was the original function of marriage. It maintained that way all the way up for probably the next 9,000 years, all the way even through the time of Jesus and the Caesars, all the way up in the time of Romeo and Juliet. And this is a very, very big misconception. Any ladies who are watching this are probably going to get very angry about what I'm about to say. Romeo and Juliet is not a fucking story about two teenagers falling in love and getting married. It's not a love story. It is a tragic comedy. Romeo and Juliet was written about how stupid these kids were for picking who they married. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't pick who you married. You should. What I'm saying is the idea of picking who you married being sort of this ubiquitous noble cause is something that did not exist in the 15th century or 16th century. It was something that we've just made up in the last 100 years. And so now let's go back to your original question, Adam. Why is it that society teaches us that we should be monogamous and do that? And the reason why is because, first of all, this institution of marriage, which maintains wealth in certain areas, it's not used for that anymore, because now we let people that don't have surnames, we let them get married. Everyone has a surname now. We let the middle class marry, poor, everyone can get married. What is the purpose of marriage now? The purpose of marriage is that now when I'm a bachelor, I'm buying this much material from Amazon. I'm buying these many cars, this many phones, and this many TVs, and I have this many pets. Okay. When I get married, that number does not double. That number does more than double. And so as a business, when I promote marriage, I am promoting consumerism. I am promoting something that basically stimulates the economy. When a family gets married, there's the cost of the marriage, the cost of the honeymoon, the cost of childcare, the cost of renovating the house, the cost of the bigger house, the cost of the second car, the cost of the third car, the cost of more TVs, the cost of the family plan for the cell phones, the cost of the medical bills, all these kind of things. They don't double. They actually go up even more. Like there's 5 people in the family. There's 2 parents and 3 kids. It doesn't go up 5x. It goes up more than 5x. And now this family is now running up unbelievable amounts of debt, and we've created this consumerism. The other reason why we promote marriage as a society is because lower status men do not get left out within a monogamous society. In a polyamorous society, men who are high status sleep with 40, 50, 60, 100 women, and men who are low status sleep with 0 women in a polyamorous society. In a monogamous society, lower status men still marry someone. They still marry their high school sweetheart or someone. And so because of that, you end up with a situation unlike what they have in the Middle East, where you have a bunch of lower status men who cannot find a wife and they strap dynamite to their chest. That's essentially what happens. They have no way of moving forward in a sexual or financial way. They have no upward mobility. And so the idea of 72 virgins sounds great to me. Let me strap a fucking, suicide vest to my chest, because I don't really have any other future any other way. And then you have, men who live in lower caste in like India who go their whole life, like they'll be 30, 40 years old, still be a virgin. They just have no opportunity to have sex with a woman or to meet a woman. And so that's a problem. That is a reason. That's actually a noble reason to promote monogamy, is that you create sort of an egalitarian nature for lower status men, and they don't end up becoming MGTOW or incels or black pill type of individuals. That's where it comes from, is that these guys don't have any upward mobility when it comes to like any sort of financial or sexual future, career, whatever. So that's the reason why that exists. But we're constantly being promoted in order to do that, because it promotes consumerism and a more stable, docile society, because there's only so many risks you're going to take when you have a wife and kids at home. And we don't want these revolutionary, crazy risk takers. The problems in society are the guys that are out there chanting on the front lines and creating all this havoc. Those guys generally aren't married with kids. The guys who come and work at the Pentagon and work their 40 years, get their pension, work, very docile, do what they're told. They have the wife and kids. They have a mortgage they have to pay. They become you end up with a society that's much more a society that's much more pliable and much more easy to control when you have the mortgage and the car payment and the 3 kids going to college. When you do that, now you have a society where that man who was a revolutionary before and had certain ideas, he doesn't have those ideas anymore, because he has a wife and kids that he has to come home to. And so now you have a much more controllable society. Does that make sense? I'm not saying one side is good or bad. What I'm saying is the pressures for me as a single man to get married come from the fact that my government wants to tax me more by me getting married and spending more money, spending more of my wealth on this marriage, this relationship, and this family, and this house, this whole family unit structure, which promotes the economy. And also because the government now understands I'm a more docile, controllable human being, because I have a family to be responsible to. And me personally, I just don't choose to conform to that. Other people can. There's absolutely nothing wrong with getting married. If you find your soulmate, go for it. It's incredible. I can't imagine being happier than finding somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with. And on certain occasions, I thought that I had found that. But what I have chosen specifically is to make decisions based on what I want and not what my family, the church, government, or society in general chooses for me.
You bring up so many important things here, and you're correct that I think, marriage was a way of combining and inheriting wealth. And, you go back to even how kings and queens married in medieval England and France and Spain and everything else. And you also bring up something that's very important in the modern political context, which is basically silence is compliance, right? Yes. And you look at the docile members of society, where I don't have time to revolt against my government or this policy or whatever else you want to say, because I have to pay this shit. Can you please shut the fuck up, because I have work to do, or I have to go do these things? And I think the COVID situation in this country in the past year has really exemplified this as an example where you have a portion of society who is like, man, I need to work and make money. The government is now throwing money at everybody because they're trying to make the population docile in their behavior and their actions. And then you have an interesting aspect where, you bring up the suicide guys and, the suicide vest bombers and everything else. You're seeing an aspect of this country also revolt against the societal norms where they are now protesting in the streets or, whatever else. But you also bring up some other massively important facts in some other previous discussions that you've had where there is a significant portion of the population of men in the United States who aren't having sex and aren't developing relationships. And this is almost why I believe that you developed this Men of Action program where you're trying to now educate the men of our society here in America, especially, or internationally as well, where you don't have to comply with what society tells you. And these are the keys to your success in order to develop, a successful interpersonal relationship with multiple people. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you seeing these things formulate in society based upon your experiences in life have put you on this roadmap to develop these ideals and explain these situations to people to make them realize something that's been in front of their face the entire time they just never wanted to acknowledge, right? And explain more about how you developed this Men of Action program and what inspired you from watching society basically crumble within itself in order to develop such a powerful level of influence for so many people.
So just to be clear, because I get a lot of confusion about this, the Men of Action program is not about dating more women. Like a lot of people, because I know I get a lot of guys from the dating community that come into the program just because they look at my social media and they see that I'm always surrounded by like these huge influencers. The program is about you having more abundance in every part of your life. And for you to understand the things that like the status that you're looking for, let's figure out how to get it in the most humane, healthy, and efficient way possible. And in doing that, of course, you will have more women that want to date you. But that is not the point of the program.
Why do you think men have that intuition where they believe that they have not been able to obtain these things? Like you said, like I don't believe that it's, oh, I just want to date a bunch of women. I want to, host the next Maxim thing, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think men have been unable to achieve those things? And what led you to want to mentor these people in order to obtain this life of abundance?
Well, I mean, natural selection selects for a small group of men to have the most access to resources, money, and reproductive qualities of women. It's always throughout time, every society, almost every society, there's a few exceptions. There has been a group of men at the top that were having sex with 80% of the women, and a group of men at the bottom, the bottom group of men, the bottom group of 80 that would have maybe 1, 2, or 4 sexual partners their entire life. And then this bottom 25% that would have maybe no sexual partners ever. There's a lot of men dying virgins going to fight in wars throughout history. This happened a lot, right? And so because of that, there's always going to be a reason why men in general, most men don't achieve what they want to achieve. The other thing, Adam, we have talked a ton about this, but we talk about testosterone. Evolution basically selected for you and me when we got into our late 30s, early 40s. We needed to step aside for the younger men to go provide for the tribe, and then we need to step aside, and they need to become now the ones that are more sexually viable mates instead of us. We are supposed to step back. We're supposed to get old and fat, and we become like the gray-haired elders, right? That's what our role is through evolution. I've just chosen to not become the gray-haired elder. I'm 44 years old. I've chose to become the black-haired dude who can bench 315 pounds and go whip 18-year-olds' asses at basketball. That's what I've chosen. That's my role that I've chosen. I've not chosen to become the elder yet. So because of that, in that society, what's happened is these men, that feeling like there's a high suicide rate of men in their 50s. What's happened is that desire for sexual selection and high status is still there, but the testosterone level goes from 900 to 800 to 600 to 400. Now you're 55, 60 years old. Now it's down in the 200s. And now you just don't have the energy or the drive to go do those things that you wanted to do because your testosterone level dropped. I think TRT in the last 10 years, testosterone replacement therapy, there's over 10 million men in the US right now that are on TRT. I think it's changed so much to where like I know guys who are physicians, cardiologists, neurologists that are on TRT, they take testosterone now. And because one of the things, if you're a guy right now and you find yourself getting a little bit overweight and you're taking Adderall in order to focus, testosterone is exactly what you need. It will get you off when you start taking tests, you don't need Adderall anymore. And then all of a sudden the fat just melts off your body, and you're not taking steroids. You're just going back to your testosterone levels when you were 19 years old. When you do that, all of a sudden you become more focused. And now those things that you wanted to accomplish, you understand, like, I am going to host next summer, hopefully, the biggest bikini competition in the history of the world. I'm a 44-year-old retired US military officer, and I am going to host a bikini competition with 200 women next summer. This is not what most 44-year-old men are doing. They are not doing this. They would not even attempt to try what I'm about to do, right? But the reason why I do it is because I'm able to maintain the focus and the edge. And the men who try to compete with me that are 25, 30 years old, they can't compete with me because of the physical prowess, the muscle mass, and the experience that I have as a human being. They're not able to compete. And I'm not talking about compete for women, just compete in life in general. That's the thing that's there. So what's happened is, what I found is, I know this is kind of a weird answer to your question, but if you go to an endocrinologist or a urologist, they'll tell you that your testosterone in the 200s is normal. Yeah, it's normal for a 70-year-old man who doesn't want to have sex with his wife. It's totally normal. You won't have a swollen prostate, and you won't have a high hemoglobin count. So I guess it's normal. What's actually normal is to be in the 5, 6, 700s. But in those cases, what happens now? Now, Adam, think about how scary we are. Okay. Before, what happened was we would get older and we'd become more docile, and now we're ready to get married. We're ready to settle down. We've become more mature. No, we haven't. Our testosterone levels dropped. That's all that happened. We're a little fatter, a little slower, and a little easier for our wives to keep up with us. That's all that's happened. That's all that's happened. So now you take this guy who's accumulated some level of wealth from the time he's 25 to the time he's 45. He's accumulated a good deal of knowledge about how to run a business or how to make money. He's accumulated knowledge on how to deal with the opposite sex over these last 20 years. And now you stick testosterone in him like he's 19 years old. This is the most dangerous motherfucker who's ever walked the planet now. You see? And urology, like, in the medical community, doesn't want that. We already have, like, again, Adam, I'm going to say this right now. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. I know as a man, I am a privileged class. I am not denying that. And I am what is called white passing. Even though my mom's Colombian, I understand that as a pseudo-Anglo male, I have huge advantages over other people. I 100% am the first person to admit that I'm privileged. When I go into a bank, when I go to a car dealership, I am absolutely treated differently than a woman would. That is 100% true. I've seen it with my own eyes. When I get pulled over by the police, I've been pulled over by the police where one of my African-American friends was the driver. I get treated differently than he does. 100% that is true. I don't care what anyone, you can come at me if you want to disagree with that. That is the truth. But the situation is, now I know that I'm already have this advantage, and now you're going to stick testosterone in me where I'm fucking 19 years old again. Are you kidding me? I become the most dangerous tiger in the fucking jungle now. And I think a lot of people don't want that. And so that's why a lot of people warn against TRT. I think we're going to see in the next couple of years, we're going to see 40, 50 million men taking this stuff. And you're going to see, I think you're going to see suicide rates going down. And you're going to see a lot more focused, happier men. I think you're going to see a lot of men way more physically and mentally productive into their 50s and 60s and 70s than you do right now, whether that's retirement age. I think that's going to change a lot when you start getting men into this thing that I personally think every man should be taking, unless you have a serious like endocrine or what's it called? Vascular problems that cause you to not take it. Other than those men, I think you're going to see a lot more people taking it. But that's what I essentially think has happened, is that we're not getting to our goals because evolution has designed us once we turn 38, 40 to like slow down. Now it's time to just like take care of your kids. You can't go around looking for those women anymore. Got time to slow down. No more trips to Jamaica. No more trips to Ibiza. It's time to slow down. Time to take all that money you made, spend it on the wife, spend it on the family, spend it on the mortgage. Time to send the kids to college. That's what evolution has designed us for, to be a slower, more docile form of male when we get into our 40s. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you choose. I've just chosen to not do that.
No, I completely agree with you. I was actually going to talk about TRT and stuff later on. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah.
Because, for me, it was a major effect in my life because, after my situation I dealt with at the Air Force Academy and like 10 years of fighting the government and federal court, like it beat me up physically, and I had to actually start, taking care of myself better. And, I'm still in the military. I still serve in the Guard, getting ready for deployment now. And I'm just like, all right, man, I got to teach these 19-year-old kids, how to shoot a gun and how to ruck up a mountain and do all these other things. And you're right. As you get older, you feel like you need to, this is what society expects fuck you.
Yeah.
I don't have to do what society
Again,
thinks
again,
or what's
again,
best
if
for me.
Adam, you and me are on The View. There's those 4 girls on The View.
Yeah.
Why don't you guys settle down? I mean, you're married, but like, when are you guys when are you gonna become a real man and settle down and take care of those kids? And I'm like, how does that make me a real man? I wouldn't serve my country. What the fuck are you talking about? How does that not make me a real man? What if I win the Nobel Prize? What if I cause a bunch of men who had hopeless, dreams and aspirations? What if I help them build the business that they've always wanted to build and meet their dream woman so that they get married? What if I can contribute to society in some other way? What if I raise $100,000 for animal rescue? Can I contribute to society in some other way than being monogamous in the form that you've prescribed for me that you think is right? No. What if I choose my own path? That's essentially the way. If I'm a woman and I choose to work, to be a working woman or to be a working mother or to be a stay-at-home mom, that's my choice. I absolutely have that choice. And we as a society, we applaud that choice. But as a man, I'm supposed to just be monogamous. I don't understand that. That doesn't really make sense to me. Whenever I watch movies like Up in the Air or Alfie or whatever, the point of the movie at the end is always like the player, he settles down with one woman and that's the happy ending to the movie. And I'm like, that's your interpretation. I don't think that's the happy ending. There's a reason why Californication got canceled. And it was because it was about a dude who just had fun and like enjoyed his life and had sex with whoever he wanted to. They had to get that show off the air because there's no way David Duchovny could be the good guy. He had to be the bad guy.
No, exactly. And who says, why do I have to dictate what society tells me to? Just because the mass of a certain passive society tells me what to do, why do I have to comply with that? I'm not over with life. I'm not even at midlife in my mind, and I'm only 34. I'm a little bit younger than you, but at the end of the day, we have things to do and things to accomplish. And like you said, you've made such a powerful influence on so many people and so many things, and you're still doing these things. And I would hope that I'm still contributing to, my edge of changing society in a way as well, even though I have a much less platform than you do. But, you bring up something very interesting when you talk about why men are expected to fall into these categories of compliance, and it's like, I think COVID made some people anyway, a little bit more introspective on, I don't have to fucking do what society tells me to and what I expect. Even the working from home revolution has really helped a lot of people focus more on their fitness, their personal health, finding something that they're passionate about in a way. And for some people, they've just taken it as, well, the government's going to pay me off to sit here and be fat, lazy, and compliant. It's really what snowman do you want to make with the snow that's just fallen to you? Are you going to make mountains, or are you going to make molehills, so to speak, right? And you have inspired so many men to go on this path of individual discovery and making themselves better and contributing to society and making a difference. What are some of the success stories that you have from people that have really started to go around from sitting around being compliant to becoming more of an effective force in our world and making such a difference in society with the Men of Action program?
So there's a misnomer. There's a few women in the Men of Action program. I'm gonna start with them. There's a few women in the program that I get to read a lot of these books on evolutionary psychology. And for some people, it's depressing. Like the plastic surgeon I was with last night, he's reading the Evo Psych book and he was like, man, this is depressing. I was like, yeah, I'd rather know the truth. What I don't want from my female friends, because most of my friends are female. The majority of my friends are female. Like, and that's why I do so many domestic abuse charities. And that's why, I try to help with that as much as I can. And they're my friends. I mean, I'm not sleeping with them. I'm not trying to sleep with them. I just look at them as like my teammates, right? Just like when I was in the military, when I played high school football, I try to expose them to as much Evo Psych as I can, because I don't want them to believe this. I don't want them to have this belief that was put in them when they were a little girl and they started dressing up like princesses, that a prince was going to come and be with them forever, no matter what, because that's not what was going to happen. And when they keep getting cheated on, because that's what happens. When you set up women in society to believe that this is what's going to happen, when you have a woman who's just like about her own shit and like is not needy or possessive, she's the one who gets the guy who stays forever. The woman who comes in there feeling like she deserves or expects the guy to be there forever, she's the one who guys lie to and then have sex with and then leave. And I try to explain this to women. It's like, you need to be about your own shit first. And then this guy realizes, oh, I have to compete to stay with this woman. Fuck, I actually have to be a better man to be with her. This woman has standards. She has a higher degree of standards. And now me as a man, I have to become worthy of her. I have some of my female friends. I have one of my female friends. She's 5'11", the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen in my life. She's so pretty. And these men just tear her down and make her feel like shit. And I grab her. And I've never had sex with this girl. I don't kiss this girl, nothing romantic. And I tell her, I was like, none of these men deserve you. that like, you are fucking incredible. Like, look at you. And then all the other girls in the room are like, yeah, you're unbelievable. She comes on the Monday calls. She's like, you're so unbelievable. Do you understand how worthless these men are? They have no chance of fucking being with you if you choose that. But like, because you let these dudes tear you down, that's the reason why these other guys feel like they have a shot with you. Right. And I have to explain this to her. And it makes her feel good sometimes, but like, she has to really inculcate it. She has to really believe it. Also, with some of the women in the program, we go through like, okay, this is, I'm really big on sales funnels. I'm really big on teaching sales and sales funnel and like an efficient business practices. And I try to go through with them. I was like, what problem are you solving as a woman in order to try to start this business that you're, and also with men too. My main thing when it comes to entrepreneurship is, what problem are you solving? Where did you become a subject matter expert? And then what is the problem you're solving? That is how you launch a business, not from your passion. Adam, I really disagree with a lot of people on this one thing. I do not believe you follow your passion. I don't. If you want to follow your passion, that is a great way to end up broke and alone. Okay. What you do is you go look at statistical probabilities and you find out where is the problem that is not being solved. You go work at Google, you look at their photo sharing platform, you realize that it's inefficient. Then on your off time, you write code for a thing called Instagram. That's how you become a billionaire. Do you understand? You go work at PayPal, you realize that they're doing some things wrong and you don't want to be a part of this. So you sell your shares of PayPal and then you go figure out a way to get us to Mars and to build electric cars.
And launching fucking rockets.
Yeah, and launch rockets. That's how you become a billionaire. Because Elon Musk was getting a PhD in material physics. And that from that, it's like a level up from being like a really, really strong, educated engineer. He wanted a PhD in material physics. Now, he never finished his PhD, but he knew enough in order to get into, he found an expertise and he found a problem that wasn't being solved. And that's how he became extremely wealthy from doing that. And also, SpaceX and Tesla were never for him to become wealthy. And because they were never for him to become wealthy, they were there to solve a problem. He happened to become the richest man in the world for a short time. He happened to become the richest man in the world because he wasn't focused on wealth. He was focused on solving other problems. So look at my situation, Adam. I was surrounded by people in a community, a self-help community full of pickup artists and get rich quick scam artists and Forex, binary options, and crypto marketing schemes that were all complete frauds, and how to fuck women in 6 days using this, like just fraudulent self-help guys. Were any of them teaching leadership? None. Were any of them teaching any level of accountability? Absolutely none. Did any of these guys have women come on their program and talk about being sexually assaulted? Fuck no, they didn't. Of course they didn't. They didn't want to do that because they don't want you to be accountable. They want to give you they want to give you the button to push to make the money. Tell me the button to push and make the money easy. And you buy the program and you don't do anything to change your life. Right? Do any of them have like guys like me who scream at them and make them fucking cry? Yeah. If you join MOA, you're going to cry. I'm going to yell at you. Is that what you want? You don't join MOA because you kind of want to change. You join MOA because you need to change. You join MOA because it's either change or death, literal death. Like you're to the point where you'd commit suicide if you didn't change your life. That's when you join Men of Action. So for that, with the changes are concerned, yeah, I have several guys in my course. I have one guy, he's an accountant. He basically used the sales funnel that I use with my Zoom calls. He used it to create these sales calls of all these other accountants. Now he's got so much business, he doesn't know what to do with it. Just imagine, Adam, if I was like sitting here and I was doing Zoom calls with hundreds or even Clubhouse calls about podcasting. So many like people, like I was talking to all these podcasting agencies, like this is what you do to get people for your podcast. All of them would want me to come on their podcast. You understand what I'm saying? You become the subject matter expertise. And then from that, when you become really sharp in this one industry, you start seeing a problem to solve, and then you solve that problem. That is how you make $1 billion, period. End of story. It is not by following your fucking passion. It is not because he's a Sagittarius and you're a Libra, so therefore you should start a business together. It is not fate or destiny or karma. It is you solve a problem that no one was solving, and then you go solve that problem, and then the money will come. That is essentially how it works. We had this huge nightclub here in Las Vegas called Chaos that was over at the Palms. And I loved it. It was a really fun place to go. And it went out of business after one summer. You want to know why? Because it didn't solve any problems. There was already a place for Skrillex to play. There was already a place for these DJs to play that was on the strip. Having a big, huge club off the strip, it didn't solve any problems. So it went out of business very quickly. That's essentially what problem are you solving? Stop following your fucking passion. Figure out what problem you're solving. Now, if you want to apply your passion to solving that problem, like for me, I like public speaking, then that's a way to follow your passion. But initially, it's what problem are you solving? I found the self-help community was not teaching accountability. It was not teaching anything to do with leadership. It was not, the dating community was not teaching you to have female friends. And so I went and attacked all these inefficiencies that I saw in this marketplace. And because of that, if you guys want to go to moamentoring.com, you can check right now. And there's like 15 testimonials of all the guys whose life I changed. Everything from guys like super introverted dudes that are throwing huge fucking destination photo shoots with 70, 80 girls to, you know, guys changing their business life to guys. It's funny because we have so many guys approach me about dating advice, because it's not a dating course, that my salespeople, that's what they're interested in. And when I try to explain to them that I teach random market hypothesis, I actually teach trading techniques for the prop firm that I work for. They're like, my salespeople are like, no, let's not sell that. And then I show them all these guys that are like, yeah, they want financial advice. Let's give it to them also. They're like blown away by it, because what happens is these guys that are on my sales team, they're used to get rich quick, sleep with these women, buy this Forex, buy this crypto. They're used to the get rich quick, do things really quick and easy type of strategy, that they're not used to this whole thing. Like, hey, here's a crazy idea. Let's make a self-help program where you have to fucking work really hard. Nobody's doing that. Nobody, not Tony Robbins. The secret, what is the secret about? Manifest shit in your head and then it will just appear. Does that sound like working hard?
Yeah,
no.
if you just manifest it, it's fine.
Yes,
It's all going to come to you. Because I'm a Scorpio. It's whatever. This is the stars.
I'm a fucking Taurus, so I'm going to manifest some shit in my life. Again, it's in, so I don't have to work. That's why I believe in these things. And so that essentially becomes the problem. So I attack that market inefficiency, and I got a bunch of guys in my program and a bunch of women in my program who have changed their life because of that.
Your program has made such a significant influence in both men and women's lives. And you talk about it in like a six-step challenge, I believe, of what it is. What are some of those steps, and how do you describe it to your clients and people that come to you who want to get involved in your program?
Okay, so it's not 6 steps. Those are the rules, the 6 rules, right?
Six rules,
sorry. 6 rules, right? Here we go. Here's the 6 rules. You want to write these down. Ready? Rule number 1. The thing about the rules, we call them rules. They're not rules. They're guidelines, but we just say rules because it's shorter. If you don't follow the rules, I'm not going to be mad at you, but the world is going to punish you if you don't follow the rules. Okay. That's what I say about the rules. I sometimes have guys be like, I know I broke this rule. I'm like, I'm not disappointed in you. The punishment for not following these rules is it's self-critiquing. It's almost like, what is the punishment for leaving the gear up when you land the airplane? You die, right? So that's what happens. You crash into the ground. The pun is like, nobody's disappointed because you didn't put the gear up. The punishment will come on its own. So when you don't follow these 6 rules, the punishment comes on its own. It doesn't come from me. I'm not disappointed in you. The punishment comes on its own. Rule number 1 is we don't listen to the words. We only pay attention to people's actions. Men who have been cheated on, or people who've been into business deals where, you know, somebody's telling you something and then it doesn't end up working out the way you think. If you go back and follow rule number 1, you retroactively go back and you say, okay, think about this whole experience, but take the words out and just look at the actions. You'll be like, oh, it all makes sense now. Oh, this guy was stealing from me the entire time. Oh, she was cheating on me the entire time. It will all make sense when you stop listening to the words and you only pay attention to people's actions. Now, you will find some people with integrity. Like I try to teach my clients to have integrity. Their words, my words mean something. My clients' words, their words mean. If you meet a guy who's hardcore MOA, he's going to tell you the truth all the time because he's taught. That's what we teach. We tell the truth all the time. But for a lot of people, their words don't mean shit. So I don't listen to the words. I never listen to the words. And I under promise and over deliver. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, this is really important, okay? Really important. All human behavior can be explained through evolutionary psychology. It's a really controversial rule, but I've also never had a single person show me that this rule isn't true. All human behavior can be explained through evolutionary psychology. You don't have free will. Your free will was created through evolution. It was selected for by evolution. Don't believe me? Go eat poop right now. Oh, you can't eat poop? Oh, I thought you had free will. You don't have fucking free will. Your desire to eat things, that your desire to not eat poop comes from your desire to avoid sulfuric smells. Where does that come from? It comes from dangerous sulfuric poisonous things like poop that would cause your body to shut down or for you to get sepsis or some kind of bacteria. So your ancestors that were evolved to know, ooh, that sulfurous, that rotten egg smell, let's stay away from that. Rotten eggs, we don't eat rotten eggs, right? Why? Because they're dangerous, they'll kill us. What rotten eggs smell like sulfur? Ooh, it smells gross. Let's not eat that. Evolution provided that for you. Your preferences do not come from God or the church or what family you belong to. Your preferences come from evolution. Your ancestors that had a fear of heights, you know what happened? They didn't jump off a cliff. Guess what happened to your ancestors that don't have a fear of heights? They were never your ancestors. They're all dead. They jumped off of trees and cliffs because they didn't have a fear of heights. Fear of heights is not something you're taught. It's something that it's a preference that was bred into you evolutionarily. And you start understanding sexual selection. You start understanding, why did she cheat on you? Why did your business partner steal money from you? Or what can I say at this job interview to get this person to actually want to hire me by finding their primary driver emotions through evolution, through evolutionary psychology. Evolution, the answer to all human behavior can be explained through evolutionary psychology. That's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is abundance is almost always the answer. Now, in some cases, not the answer. If you have cancer, taking HGH is not, taking abundance of HGH is not the answer. That's just gonna make the cancer grow. But almost always it's the answer. Hey, Michael, how do I get my ex-girlfriend back? Date more women. Hey, Michael, how do I get over my ex-girlfriend? Date more women. Hey, Michael, how do I get better at dating? Date more women. Hey, Michael, how do I feel better about myself as a person? Date more women. The answer is always more and better. The answer is always abundance. Hey, Michael, should I on my social media, should I post more on my grid or should I post more on my story? Both. More. Both. Better. The answer is almost always abundance. The answer is to have 2 or 3 or 6 sources of income. The answer is to be capable of, hey, Michael, what language should I learn to code in? How about Python and C++? Like learn SQL, learn all those different languages. The answer is more. The answer is abundance. What happens is, you ever see women have this misconception sometimes that men have this misconception that women only date assholes. They don't date assholes. They date men who have options. And those men who have options, they just like, hey, I'm not going to put up with your bullshit right now. I'm leaving. And from her standpoint, he's an asshole. He's not an asshole. He just has options. But having those options makes him more attractive to her because he has abundance. The same thing. Again, what happens when you have an offensive coordinator in the NFL and all of a sudden they have the #1 offense in the league? What's he going to get the next year, Adam?
He's going to get the option to stay or move whatever team he wants to go to.
And so the team that currently has him, what are they going to do to his contract?
They're definitely going to increase his availability of money to entice him to stay.
Correct. So like same thing. This is what happened with Kellen Moore and the Dallas Cowboys. They got a really good offense, and probably Jerry Jones is going to money whip him to stay as the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. That's essentially what happens. So because you have abundance, everything else works out in your favor. The world gets easier. What do I also say? If I want to show an abundance of like from a networking standpoint, what do I say? I say everybody in MOA needs to have 6 female friends. You need to show me your 6 female friends. 6 female friends, you have a birthday party, 20, 30 females show up. Every guy wants to network with you. Every girl wants to come to your party. Again, abundance has created the answer for you. It's fixed your networking problems also. The answer is always abundance. Almost always abundance. So obviously there's some case like, hey, how do I get over my heroin addiction? More abundance of heroin. That's not the correct answer. So it's not always abundance. It's not always abundance, but most of the time it's abundance, an abundance mentality. Okay, that's rule number 3. Rule number 4, this is a big one, man. This is a big one for those guys who are not on social media. Social media is fake, and I'm okay with that. You have to say it to yourself. You have to look in the mirror. Man, fuck, I can't stand that these guys are having more fun with me. Wait a second, but Michael said something. Oh, that's right. Rule number 4, social media is fake, and I'm okay with that. It's okay. It's okay. You want to buy followers? I don't recommend you buying followers. But if you did, understand other people are buying followers. Girls are using Face app. People are showing like versions of their life that aren't true. Another way of saying rule number 4 is the world is not fair, and I'm okay with that. The world is not fair, and I'm okay with that. Some people were born with more money than with me, and I'm okay with that. Some people were born better looking than me, and I'm okay with that. The world is not fair, and I'm okay with that. But the way we say it is social media, because that's how we view the world today. Social media is fake, and I'm okay with that. That what happens is guys get depressed, and also we are social media producers and not social media consumers. That's the other part of rule number 4, or actually or rule number 5, whichever. Rule number 5 is we do not hate on other people. We do not experience jealousy, and we do not experience FOMO, or we don't let jealousy and FOMO affect us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
We don't hate on other people. We don't let jealousy or FOMO affect us. And then we are social media producers, not social media consumers. Also, rule number 5 is nobody needs to know how much money you make. Actually, no, that's rule number 6. Sorry. Rule number 5 is we don't let jealousy or FOMO affect us, and we are social media producers, not social media consumers, which means we don't talk shit about other people. Okay, that's rule number 5. And rule number 6 is nobody needs to know who you're fucking, and nobody needs to know how much money you make. You don't qualify to people. So rule number 5 is we don't let FOMO affect us, and rule number 6 is we don't qualify to other people. Basically, that's what it is. And those are the 6 rules of men of action. If you follow those rules, you're going to find out that you're going to have a lot higher status in life, and you're going to have a lot more people that trust you and count on you. If you don't follow those rules, you're going to get caught in this this weird fucking place where you have to lead with money in order to get girls, or you have to lie to people in order to get your job, or you get depressed when you look at other people's social media, or you keep getting put into these weird financial situations where you're lied to all the time because you didn't follow rule number 1. You follow those 6 rules, and rule number 7 informally, this is not actually rule number 7, but informally we call this rule number 7. It's from the U.S. Code of Conduct. U.S. Military Code of Conduct. I will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor will I tolerate anyone amongst us who does. That's not actually rule number 7, but to me, it kind of is. I may make it rule number 7 at some point, but I will not lie, cheat, or steal, and I do not tolerate anyone amongst us who does. And we always underpromise, overdeliver. We almost all underpromise, overdeliver. Those are some of the tenets of the Men of Action program.
That's such an incredible list, and I think if people just really got on board with what you're saying, we'd have such a significant difference in society. You know, you were a kid that grew up being bullied. You didn't have it easy growing up. You didn't have everything that you have now. You grew up serving your country. You've seen the best and the worst in people. How did you ever develop the concept, in closing, of living a life of gratitude and living in the present?
So the gratitude in the present came from my dad dying, my girlfriend breaking up with me on my first deployment, all within 6 weeks. And then I know this is going to sound petty compared to those other 2 things. If you guys remember June of 2006, the Dallas Mavericks were up on the Miami Heat 2-0 in the NBA Finals, and they fucking lost 4 games in a row. And I know for a lot of people that wouldn't be that big of a deal, but I was very depressed after that. Like I am above everything else, above being a Longhorn fan or a Cowboys fan. I am a Dallas Mavericks fan. I've been a Dallas Mavericks fan for 40 years. And watching them lose, it hurt a lot. And I just felt like the world was like coming after me. I got back to the States. The girl was still seeing the other guy. My dad was still passed away. And a guy recommended The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I would say, I'm here where I am now, talking to other people and trying to help them because of that book. The first 3 chapters, I pulled over beside the road, almost started crying. I realized, man, I don't really have to care about these things. I don't have to care about them. You know what I'm saying? I can, but I don't have to. And I get to choose what I care about. Later on, the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson, actually had a huge effect on me. But that's where it is. Like, for me personally, there's 2 sides to it, right? There's the side of, I just want to be happy and content. So I'm going to meditate and go to yoga and do these things I love and rescue the cats and have gratitude and experience these amazing things with my friends. But you don't want to do that to the point where you're smoking marijuana, taking fucking mushrooms, and you never do anything with your life. Okay. Then there's the other side of me. It's like, I want that happiness, but I want that happiness with 7, 8, 9 zeros in my bank account. And I want to be so attractive to the opposite sex that I get to choose anyone I want. That's the other side of this happiness. Does that make sense? There's 2 sides to this coin. You have to do both. You can't want, some people don't like that book, The Power of Now, because they think it makes you not take action, but it does. What it does is it calms your mind and brings you to the present moment so that you can take right action. When you have a mind filled with gratitude in the present moment, now you're focused and ready to take the correct action so that you can focus on the things you learned from the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, or you learn how to solve other people's problems so that you can make $1 million. Cool.
It makes 100% sense to me. Mike, if you had anything to say in closing to your audience and anyone else who listens to this podcast, what would it be?
I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of people are going to watch this and then go check me out on social media and be like, fuck, dude, what is this? It's like a bunch of girls and it's crazy. And I host all these parties or whatever. And it's weird because I'll host these parties. And then later on this week, I'm going to post a podcast where I interview a theoretical physicist for 3 hours. And we talk about particle physics and quantum mechanics and Newtonian physics and relativity. And it's not going to fit. Because your idea of what an academician is supposed to look like, or a guy who parties in Vegas, they're supposed to not match. They're not supposed to fit. And they certainly don't fit with the idea of being a U.S. military officer. And they certainly don't fit with the idea of being a prop firm portfolio manager. I'm returning my clients right now. I'm up to 40% returns to my clients this year. So these things don't match and they don't fit. And the thing is, if you understand that you don't fit either, because when people ask me, how'd your day go? And I'm like, I don't know how to explain to them that I did a podcast with you and set up a bunch of futures trades and rescued a cat. Like it doesn't fit with them. These people it doesn't make sense to them. But here's the thing. If you are in a situation in your life where you know something has to change, if it kind of has to change, hey man, listen, stick with your government job and stick with your lifelong girlfriend. You might not be that attracted to her, but you know what? That's a safe way to live. We used to say this, beta males, they get to eat too. Beta males get to have sex with like 1 or 2 women. They get cheated on, but beta males get to live. Like, it's not that bad being a beta male. I totally understand that. But if you honestly know that that isn't the life for you, and you would be willing to do anything to change it, you'd be willing to move, change jobs, you'd be willing to piss off everyone in your family. Maybe my family doesn't seem to mind what I'm doing, but you'd be willing to do anything to change it. Check out this program, MOAmentoring.com. Go to my Instagram and then look in the link in the bio, and they'll send you to my mentoring program. If you're not ready to change, come on the free calls, hang out with us. Most of you listening to this, you are not in enough pain or enough suffering or feel enough angst to come to where I'm asking you to come to. You're not ready for this yet, and that's totally fine. Like, not everyone in the Navy can join the SEALs, but if that's what you want, then you need to come and join us. And once you join this community, you will start to understand the responsibility that's given to you. But you see these results so fucking fast, you start to understand these things that you've been missing. I hate the term red pill because I feel like the pickup community has taken that and bastardized that. But it is really like this thing you've been uncovered, and you start to see the world for what it is through evolutionary psychology, solving other people's problems, an abundance mindset, not listening to the words of other people, having a ton of awesome female friends that sort of like, again, I get invited to the Playboy Man. Rollo Tomasi and some of these other pickup guys are like, you can't have female friends. I get invited to the Playboy Mansion because I have female friends. I get invited to the Maxim party because I have female friends. I have female friends that are constantly introducing me to other females. So they're wrong. You can have female friends. And so I'm actually going to have a debate with that. There's a King Tate that's coming on my podcast, and he's actually going to debate me, that whole idea. So if you don't want to change, but you have to change, then come on and check out the program. And let's jump in. And by the way, if you don't want to go that far, you just want to come on our Monday calls and shoot the shit, have some fun with us, you can do that also. And if you just want to check out the podcast because you're interested in learning about what a playmate thinks, an F-18 pilot thinks, a Dan Bilzerian thinks, what Jeremy Piven thinks, or what Kindly Myers and Chloe Teray, the 2 playmates, what they think, or CJ Sparks or Talia Paris or whoever. If that's what you want, jump on the podcast and check out the podcast. If you listen to the podcast and it resonates with you, then you might be interested in the Men of Action program.
Couldn't agree more. Michael Sartain, you are a man of action. You have made such a significant difference in people's lives. And I just want to appreciate you being so gracious with your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really hope that people become inspired to become a man of action like yourself, follow your program. And if you guys are out there, definitely listen to the Michael Sartain podcast. You know, I listened to a few episodes today before getting on this call. You know, I've researched my clients too, so to speak, and he is a man of inspiration. And I couldn't agree more with the message that he's setting out there into the world. So thank you so much once again.
All right, man. Take care, brother. Let me know whenever you post this, and I'll promote the shit out of it. And let me know when you come to Las Vegas.
No, absolutely.